Alright, looks like we got everyone here, so I'm going to get started. So, on the Chronomancer, your main role is Boomstrip and CC. And by CC, if you don't know, that means pulls, lockdowns, stuff like that. The main way that you achieve pulls on this is your Focus 4 is a pull, and your Gw2 is a lockdown that will actually float players. Most times these skills will not land if the target has stability, these skills will not land. So that's why you also strip boons, so you can get rid of that stability and then do your pulls. Yes, it is being recorded. So we run full Wanderer's gear on here with Rune of Leadership. And the Wanderer's gear gives you a good bit of vitality, toughness, and concentration while giving you a little bit of power as well, so you can do a little bit of power damage on this build. It's not a whole lot, and you're not really focusing on power damage. It comes passively with your Boomstrip and your Shatter skills, things like that. Then the weapons that we use are Scepter Focus and Sword Shield, with Relic of the Demon Queen, which makes it so that whenever you disable a foe, it applies poison, and that poison is increased in effectiveness. Normal poison heal reduction is 33%. Relic of the Demon Queen increases that to a 50% heal reduction. So if you see here, I actually tag on this build sometimes, so my sigil on my shield is wrong. It should be absorption and nullification on both sets, but I use bounty so that I get some extra concentration. Just keep nullification on that instead. So I'm going to start off with your utility skills over the weapon skills. First skill obviously is going to be your heal. That puts down a light field on the ground. You can target it up to 900 range. Pulses 3 times. It does a pretty good heal, and it also removes conditions on pulse. Because it is a light field, other people can blast it and remove more conditions. Your second skill, Mantra of Concentration, which hang on, I just got a message from Spitty. Okay, never mind, scratch that. So, Mantra of Concentration is your second skill. Hang on one second, he was clearing some things up. Okay, cool. I thought we were going to be changing Mantra of Concentration to Well of Precognition, but we're not. We're leaving it on Concentration. So that is your second skill. This is a stun break for you. It will also grant stability to nearby allies. And that's pretty much it, because on the charge phase, it will give you Aegis for 8 seconds. However, the charge is so long, you're going to want to make sure that you have it charged before combat. Your next skill, Signet of Illusions. This is where you get a lot of your clones from. It creates a clone every few seconds just while you're in combat, and then that is the passive. The active, when you use it, is that it recharges Shatter skills. So the only one that it does not recharge is your Continuum Split, because that is not a Shatter skill. So F1 through F4 will be recharged when you consume your Signet of Illusion. So it is always best to make sure you consume your Signet after you have used all of your F1 through F4 skills. Your number 9 skill, Null Field, is probably one of your biggest boon strips. You can target it up to 900 range. It pulses 3 times, targets up to 5 people, and it will remove boons from allies. It will also remove remove boons from foes. It will also remove conditions from allies. So if you can on a push, put this in our feet with the other group, and that way it will help us and hurt them at the same time. Generally, that's not always going to be the case. You're probably going to put it in the path of the enemy group when they're pushing to us, just like you would with Wells on Necromancer. You want to try to get the most out of it since it pulses 3 times, so if you're doing that and they're moving, you want to try to get it at the front of the group so it can affect the whole group. Now your last skill, Gravity Well, this one's the most fun and the coolest sounding by far. Everyone knows Gravity Well. You've all been hit by Gravity Well. You've been lifted up in the air, floated around, bounced, and you know the feeling. It's not fun, but it's a lot of fun to do it to other people. So generally, on a push, or say we're in a choke, you know, we're ranging at enemies. You don't have a whole lot of skills that you can use to range at enemies. And they don't really do a lot of damage. So your main role in that situation would be to use your Focus 4, your Null Field, and your Gravwell. Not quite in that order. Generally, you would want to place the Null Field down. If you can get some clones on the enemies, use your Shatter skills on them, because when you use a Shatter skill, that removes a boon. So that's generally the idea. You want to remove a boon with Null Field or Shatter skills, then you would place your Focus 4 down, and then you use the second action of the Focus 4, which is the pull. And that pulls enemies towards the focus, and then generally you would want to try to trap them with a Gravity Well. At that point, they'll end up dying by everyone else's damage. So, moving on to the weapon skill. On Scepter Focus, you've got your auto attack, which is your chain. This is where a lot of your clones come from as well, because on the 3rd hit in the chain, it will generate a clone. This skill can be reflected, however, it does not cause a whole lot of damage, but just watch out for that because it can be reflected. Your number 2 skill is a block that will also generate a clone. Sorry about that. Yeah, so your number 2 is a block that will also generate a clone. Your number 3 is a strike that will channel. It's like a 2.5 second cast time, so it takes a little bit, and it will cause confusion on enemies. This is a pretty good skill because it will pierce, so if you aim, kind of at the back of the group, then it will hit them. To my knowledge, it does not reflect. Someone correct me if I'm wrong. Alright, cool, thanks Barnaby. So moving on, Temporal Curtain, that is your pull. It is also a light field. You can place this down, say if we're running in front of the group, when you run over it, it'll give swiftness to the group. Generally, if we're going to be in combat, I wouldn't use it for that, because this is going to be one of your most used skills, and one of your most fun skills. When you see that go up on a wall, and there's enemies up there, that's how you know a pull's about to happen. If you're not the Chronomancer, if you haven't used Chronomancer before, now you know what that is when you have seen it before. And that's how generally enemies get yeeted off the wall, that and Greatsword 5 from Necro. Your number 5 skill is another, well, this actually generates a phantasm, but phantasms turn into clones after they finish their action. So that's another way to generate a clone. The reason that you want clones on this build is because your clones will remove a boon when you use your Shatter skill. So when you use any of these F1 through F4 skills, it will cause that action to happen at your clone and around you. So depending on how many clones you have, it will remove more boons. And depending on how many clones you have for each skill, it will increase the effects of the skill. So if you see with your F1, depending on how many clones up to 1 to 3, you'll do more damage. Your F2, depending on how many clones you have, it's really just going to reduce the recharge. Yeah, so for each clone that you have, it will reduce the recharge by 3 seconds. Also, this will give Vigor. Every one of your Shatter skills also give Alacrity, and the Alacrity is increased based on how many clones that you shatter as well. you don't know what alacrity is, that reduces your skill recharge. When you see your skills recharging and it goes from just a whitish gray to the green recharge, that's when you have alacrity and it's recharging faster. So then your F3 will give vulnerability. It'll also give fury to allies, and same thing, alacrity is also a daze. Oh, here we go, we got people messing with us again, just like last weekend. If you don't know one thing about Chrono, it is a very tanky class. You can survive pretty long time. If you're just roaming on a Chrono, you can run into a group if you know what you're doing and just run right out of it and take barely any damage. And one of the reasons for that is because of all of the blocks that you have in this class. So, moving on to your F3, like I said, it is a daze. And then your F4 is kind of like your oh shit skill. This gives you distortion, which distortion gives you immunity to all damage and conditions. So you can't take any damage while you have distortion, and it will increase based on how many clones you have. So if you have 3 clones, I think it lasts for about 3 seconds. I could be wrong about that. Yeah, it's somewhere around there. But 3 seconds, yeah, so it might be 4 seconds if you have 3 clones. Yeah, which is a long time to be invulnerable. So that's kind of the last one you want to use. If you notice that you're about to die, I generally will use this. Maybe use it on a heavy push if we're outnumbered to mitigate some of the damage coming into me so the healing can go to other people. That's only if I'm really out of my block. So moving on to your next weapon set, we've got sword and shield. So your first skill on sword, your auto attack, does vulnerability for the first 2 strikes, and the 3rd strike removes a boon. It does more damage to foes without boons. Your number 2 is a skill that you can only use while stationary. If you move, it will cancel. But it is a blur for 1 second, which is basically an evade. So this is kind of another defensive skill that I use. I generally don't use it for damage. I'll prioritize it for an evade if we're in a stack and we're taking heavy damage. You can use that to mitigate some damage to you. Your number 3 is the skill that you have that generates a clone. You have to have a target for it to work. Be very careful about using the secondary skill. Most of the time you will not even get the chance to because that clone ends up dying pretty fast. If you do use the secondary skill, then you will swap places with that clone. So, if you have someone 900 away and you make a clone at them, or 600 away, sorry, and you make a clone at them and you hit that secondary skill, then you'll teleport to them. The tag in does do that sometimes, you'll notice. Just be very careful with that one. Your number 4 skill, your shield 4, this is probably my second favorite skill on this class. This is a skill that allows you to basically run into enemy groups and take no damage, as long as they're not using anything that is unblockable. So this has 2 actions. The first action is it's about a 10-second block or so. No, a little less, a lot less actually. It's like a 3-second block. Seems like longer in combat. But if you successfully block with the first action, then you will gain access to another block. Just make sure that you use that second block within 10 seconds or you will lose the ability. Then your shield 5 will give swiftness and might to allies, and it is also a stun to enemies. And it is a projectile block. as you see when you use it, it will return to your location. So if you step to the side, it'll, you know, when it flips around, it'll flip to you. This is another good skill to use on a block because it is basically a double interrupt. It interrupts on both pathways, forwards and backward. So that is the basic usage of skills and weapons. I'm going to move on to your combo for a bomb. And this is what every group is using right now, and this is why when we push into another group and you get pinballed around 50 times and you're like, what the heck is going on, where did all my stab go? This is why, because they each have like 5 to 6 Chronomancers, and if you do this bomb correctly, each Chronomancer can get off 2 gravity wells. So, if you watch very closely, your F5 skill, Continuum Split. This will destroy all clones and create a rift in time-space continuum. When it expires, you will go back to where that rift was created. This will also give you resistance and inflict vulnerability on enemies. Whenever you go back to the place where the rift started, every skill that you used, every skill that you used, the health that you had before, your endurance, is all replenished. Now, it's basically like you didn't do anything, and you just return to where you were, but all your skills still land. And like every other one of your F skills, this scales based on how many clones you have. You'll notice in World vs. World, it is very hard to upkeep clones. With the amount of damage that we're taking in a fight, generally the best you can look for in a Zerg fight is to get 1 clone. You'll start to look at your bar here. These are your clones. When it is a solid white color, that's how you, or I forget if it's white or purple, but when it is a solid color and not empty in the middle, that's how you know how many clones you have, up, 1 through 3. So generally you're going to be watching that, and you want to oftentimes wait until you have at least 1 clone to use your shatter skills, especially your Continuum Split. So because your Continuum Split recharges every skill that you used while you were using it, with the exception to Mimic. If you do have Mimic on your bar, which we do not, this will not regenerate Mimic, unfortunately. So depending on how many clones you have will determine how long the Continuum Split lasts. 0 clones, you have 1.5 seconds. That's about enough time to get off 1 skill. 1 clone, 3 seconds, 2 clones, 4.5, 3 clones, 6 seconds. So oftentimes if we're fighting a Lord and we know a group is about to push, you can upkeep 3 clones on a Lord. It's not hard. And that way you can be ready for a big bomb when the enemy group pushes. So if you have 3 clones up, then you get a whole 6 seconds to do anything you want, and every skill will come back. That includes all your shatter skills as well. I do not think it works with Signet of Illusions. I could be wrong about that. Thanks, Gina. So, your priority with Continuum Split is going to be Gravwell. Generally, you're going to have 1 to 0 clones in a fight, and you want to get that Gravwell off twice. The way to do this with 0 clones is, because Gravwell has a second cast time, you will start the cast of your Gravwell, and then you will hit your Continuum Split. I either messed up or it only works in combat. Yeah, okay, so I messed up. But there you go, that's how you do it. If you have 0 clones, you start the Gravity Well, and then you hit your Continuum Split. When Continuum Split ends, you will have a second Gravity Well, and you can go ahead and drop that at the enemy's feet. There's 2 Gravity Wells right in their feet. If they got stability out of the first one, chances are they're probably going to get stuck in the second. Now, on top of that, if you're on the Lord and say you have 3 full clones and you see an enemy group pushing, because you have 6 seconds where you can do anything you want, I'll generally spam out pretty much every skill that I can except for my Signet of Illusions. So I'll start my Continuum Split, I'll drop a Gravity Well where they're coming, or sorry, no, I won't start with the Gravity Well. I'll drop a Null Field where they're coming in, I'll drop Well of Eternity at our feet for healing, then I'll try to get some clones on them and spam out every single one of my Shatter skills and drop a Gravity Well, all within that 6 seconds. Then when that's up, every single one of those skills will be back. And on top of that, because you didn't use your Signet of Illusions, now you can spam out all of your Shatter skills again, removing tons of boons. Alright, sorry, don't spam them out. You want to use them sparingly. Gotcha. Yeah, so essentially you can get 3 rounds of clones, or Shatter skills off doing it that way if you have 6 clones up when you use your Continuum Split. Now, when you use Continuum Split, the cooldown will be, I mean, it's pretty long, so generally after a big bomb, you're not going to have too many utility skills left to use, you're going to be waiting for cooldown. So that's where you want to kind of try to space things out a little bit and not spam them out. And now this is where you're going to want to use your weapon skills like your Sword 3 to generate more clones, your Scepter 2 to generate another clone, and your Scepter 5 to generate more clones. These are quick ways to generate clones without having to spam out 3 auto attack, an auto attack chain and hit the 3rd hit to make a clone. Although that is one of the best ways to do it on stationary objects like cannons, any kind of siege or lures, tower lures, stuff like that. So yeah, that's pretty much it for the chrono training. Just things to remember is you want to strip your null field, all of your shatter skills strip, your F4 is your oh shit, your F5 you want to use with your gravity well so that you can get 2 gravity wells off. If you have more clones, then you can get more skills to be recharged. And more strips, more pulls, the better on this class. When you're using your temporal curtain, your scepter, your focus 4 for pulls, you can pull people off of ledges. So like say we're outside of a tower, they're up on the ledge. I'll come over here. Say this is the wall, they're up there. Just try to get as close as you can. Place it up pretty high. If you can get like an object that like say like the little barriers they have on the wall, if you can kind of get it across that barrier, so it's more vertical, like more of their level, then it's better off at pulling them like over the edge. If you don't really, another thing you can do is if we don't have too many chronos, you can continuum split your gravel and just use it one time on the people that are up there, and kind of lock them down. That'll give people a chance to kill them if they don't get pulled all the way off. Another thing to remember is your shield 4 is another pretty big oh shit skill. It's a very long block, especially if you get that first one off, you'll get a second block, another pretty long block. And your sword 2 is a pretty good evade to you. So yep, that's pretty much it. Let's go ahead and swap to whatever class you want to play. If you want to play Chrono, that's cool. We are going to need a few Firebrands, healers, and damage though.
Thanks, Peaks.
Yep.
Thank you, Pete.